The language of plague. The air was thick with laughter when I walked through the door, the kind of laughter that slices through flesh and bone. I stood frozen on the threshold, clutching the old leather satchel that had been my companion for years, the weight of it now filled with more than just papers and books. It seemed to pulse with a dark energy, a reminder of the world I delved into, the world they'd so viciously mocked. "Look who's back from the loony bin!" My brother's voice boomed across the living room, cutting through the chatter of my family gathered like vultures around a feast. Their eyes, those familiar eyes, were wide with a mix of disbelief and scorn, and I felt the familiar pang of betrayal twist in my gut. I took a step forward, my heart racing with the memories of every cruel word they'd hurled at me over the years. "You're obsessed with ghosts," they'd said. "You'll disgrace the family. You'll lose your mind." I had lost my mind, and in that loss, I had found a truth that they would never understand. "Still playing with your haunted words, are you?" My father sneered, his tone dripping with disdain. His laughter mingled with those of my siblings, a cruel symphony of mockery. I had come home not as their disappointment, but as a herald of what lay beyond their ignorance. I took a deep breath, forcing down the memories of the countless nights spent deciphering the twisted grammar of the ancient text I had unearthed. The words that had beckoned me into the depths of despair, murmuring secrets that didn't just haunt the mind, but infected the very soul. I had been expelled from my position as an epidemiologist for proposing that an ancient pathogen didn't just spread through the body, but through language itself. A virus that thrived on fear, manipulating the very fabric of communication to spread dread and death. "Let me show you something," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I reached into my satchel, rummaging through the papers until I found the one I sought, a printout of the last case I had documented, a report on a recent outbreak in a small town. I laid it before them, the words shifting ominously on the page, as if alive. They leaned in, curiosity momentarily breaking through their disdain. "What is this?" my sister asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "Read it," I urged, feeling the tremor of adrenaline dance down my spine. I could see their skepticism, the way they rolled their eyes, but they were drawn in, the words beginning to take on a life of their own. "It's not just words, it's a warning." And then it happened. The lights flickered, plunging us into an unsettling twilight. Shadows crawled along the walls, and I watched as my family's faces twisted from amusement to confusion, then to terror. It was as if the very atmosphere had thickened, saturated with the whispers of the damned. The room filled with a palpable dread, a living presence that responded to my invocation. "Stop this!" my father shouted, his bravado collapsing under the weight of an unseen force. "This isn't real!" But the air shimmered with reality. The words on the page began to swirl, shifting like smoke, forming grotesque shapes that writhed in the dim light. I could feel the ancient pathogen vibrating in the air, a sinister energy that I had learned to harness, to channel into this very moment. "What have you done?" my sister whispered, her voice trembling as the shadows elongated, twisting into forms that echoed the fears we all carried. I could see the truth dawning upon them, the chilling realization of what they had dismissed as delusion. "What I've uncovered," I replied, my voice a whisper now, "is something far more dangerous than you ever imagined." The grotesque shapes began to morph into familiar faces, people from our past, lost to miscommunication and misunderstanding, their mouths agape in silent screams. I could feel the weight of their pain, the betrayal of being unheard, and I reveled in it. I had survived the darkness that they had never dared to explore. The air crackled with tension, and my family recoiled as the shadows drew closer, circling them like a predator. I stood still, a harbinger of their fate as they faced the consequences of their disbelief. "Please stop," my brother begged, his bravado crumbling into desperation. "We were wrong. We didn't understand." But I was no longer the victim in this story. I had become the vessel of truth, the keeper of horrors they had once ridiculed. I felt a surge of satisfaction, a cathartic release as I watched the shadows wrap around them, their laughter now replaced with cries of terror. And then, just as suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The shadows receded, the lights flickered back to life, and I found myself standing alone before my family, who now looked utterly transformed, pale, trembling, and raw with the realization of what lay beyond their ignorance. I gathered my papers and turned to leave, the echoes of their pleas trailing behind me like a haunting melody. I had wanted them to see, to understand the true nature of my obsession, but I knew now that some truths were never meant to be shared. As I stepped out into the night, the air was crisp, filled with the weight of secrets and the remnants of fear. I had returned not just to vindicate myself, but to remind them of the cost of their mockery. I was no longer their disgrace. I was their warning. In the dark, I could hear the soft whispers of the ancient pathogen, the language of plague that had become my life's work. I would carry it with me, a dark crown upon my head, as I walked the path between worlds, forever changed, forever vigilant.